They pray according to Makkah. So he's saying Maghrib in Bode will be meaning 1 hour. Okay, forget it. So he was just trying to be clever that we were now praying actually in al-Qura, according to al-Qura, but we're praying exactly the same time as we did yesterday in the Arctic. And this was the beauty of what had happened. Then I travelled to Jeddah to see some of my teachers, and then I put this fiqh question to them, and they looked at me as if to say, "You did what?" I said, "I prayed according to al-Qura." And I could see on one of their faces as if I'd left Islam. It was as if I had left Islam. His face was like, "We thought you were one of us." And then one of the other sheikhs is an older man, much older than me. You may know him, Dr. Mustafa Badawi. He turned and he said, "Maybe he's right. Move on." As if to say, don't criticize him. I could see in his face, he's thinking, "You're wrong, but maybe you're right." You know that's the answer? You're wrong, but maybe you're right. Whereas the other one, "You're wrong! You're wrong, no chance!" And in my heart, I'm right, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay? You see what my understanding of fiqh is? Fiqh isn't following, you're probably new in Glasgow, right? There are two big football teams. One wears green, alhamdulillah, and one wears blue. And don't anyone ever suggest that I support one of the two teams, because I'm totally unbiased, okay? And it's just a rumour that goes around that I support Celtic, okay? It's just a rumour that I support Celtic, and I don't know where this rumour comes from. But alhamdulillah, if you are asked, basically you have to choose one of the two teams. That's what happens in Scotland, because there's no sitting on the fence. That's not what it's like with madhab. The madhabs are not football teams. Okay? The madhab, an idea of a madhab is for you to understand fiqh, not for you to become fanatical about a person. Okay? Now when I say I was taught the madhab of Imam Shafi'i, I was taught the madhab of Imam Shafi'i so that I could practice my deen, so I could pray, so I could fast. Now if it's stopping me from doing the basic things, it doesn't do the thing that it's supposed to do. And that's where this lesson is going to get complicated, because there are issues which are not so clear-cut as the Shafis say this, the Malikis say that, you choose which one you like. Rangers bought this player, Celtic bought this player, you choose which one you want to support. It's not that simple. Now, it's about important things, about what's valid and what's not valid. And you need to make sure that your prayer is valid. You don't have to support Celtic. It's better if you do. Did I say that aloud? You don't have to support Celtic. You don't have to become fanatical about a madhab to the extent that it stops you from doing your deen properly. That's what I understand as fiqh. Now I do follow a madhab, and when I answer the questions, I'm going to try my best to answer within the context of what Imam Shafi'i said, because I was told specifically. It says with emphasis on the Shafi school. Okay, is that okay? That's assuming that most of the people from Malaysia have been taught that madhab. All right, so that's my understanding of fiqh. That's my understanding of the traveller. And so it comes to these questions, and I've got 7 questions here, which I assume people here have either asked or the committee have realised that that's what our main issues here. The first one is differences in prayer times. Right. There are not really great differences between the scholars about how the prayer times fall. There are only 2 basic hadith which are sahih related to the prayer times. Okay? In the first hadith, Jibril appears to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says, "Pray at this time." And it's dark, Fajr time. The light has just appeared. And this is what's described in the Quran as when the Hayt al-Abyad becomes clear from the night. A white line appears in the sky. He says, "Pray." And then he comes again at us at dhuhr time, and the sun is bright in the sky. And he says, pray. And then he comes and it's halfway through the afternoon. And he says, pray. And then he comes and the sun has just set and he says, pray. And then he comes and the sun has just turned, the shafaq al-ahmar, the red light, has just disappeared from the sky. And this hadith is the basis of the prayer times. This is the first hadith. And the second one, he does the same thing, but instead of praying right at the beginning of the time, he prays the sun is almost up, to the extent that you can see the face of the people around you. So when you go to the mosque, you can say, what's your name, brother? Azra. It's Azra. And Firdaus. Firdaus. Whereas the first time, I say, who's this? Okay? This is the difference in the time. The dark prayer, the light, it was dark for the first. The next time, it was light, so you could see somebody, you could recognize who's who. And then the dhuhr time, he doesn't pray in the sun's in the middle of the night, in the middle of the sky. The fayh, the heat of the day had disappeared. The heat of the day had disappeared, meaning it's almost afternoon. And he said, pray. So the dhuhr now is almost over. And he said, pray. And then he prayed the asr. And asr that was way past, just after the second mithal, way into the second half of the day. And then he prayed maghrib, and the shafaq al-ahmar was still there. The redness of the sky was still there, but it was just disappearing. Almost Isha time. And then they came again, and it was dark. Muntasif al-layl. The darkness of the night, now wouldn't know which was which. Okay. All Malaysians look the same. When it's that dark, we can't tell the difference. So here we have two hadith, but they don't contradict each other. Can you see what the hadith is teaching us? It's beginning waqt, awwal waqt, wa akhir al-waqt. The beginning of the time and the end of the time. The rest of the hadith that come about the time, if you look in the book on Kitab Awqat al-Salah, the book of the times of the prayer, you'll see all the rest of the hadith explain that. For example, there's a hadith which says, we went to the prayer and it was so dark we couldn't see who was who. That explains what I've just said. That was what. And then there's another hadith where it says, we went to the prayer and it was so light that we were scared the sun was about to come up. Meaning the Jama'at prayer was already so late. And then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, I almost missed I prayed when the sun rose. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Man adraka rak'atan qabla tulu' al-fajr faqad adraka al-fajr. Whoever prays the fajr time before the sun has risen, even one rak'ah, has caught the fajr. And then there's another hadith where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, when it's hot, be wary of the fayh, the fire of the day. For this fayh is the fayh of Jahannam. This fire that comes in the heat of the day. Now in Malaysia, it's not that hot. It is hot, but it's humid. The humidity is so it's not a fayh, it's not a burning fire. But if you've traveled through the desert, I mentioned I was in Tunisia. In Tunisia, we never pray dhuhr in the middle of the day. We always pray half an hour before Asr. Unless you pray in your home. Because it's too hot to go to the mosque. You just can't walk in that heat. So you hear about half an hour before the Asr time, As-salatu qa'ima. No adhan. Because it's not the beginning of the waqt. They say, As-salatu qa'ima. I mean, we're going to pray now. They just say 3 times over the loudspeaker, everyone comes to the mosque, they pray the dhuhr. They sit around, read a bit of Quran, do some dua, and then they call the adhan. It's Asr time. Why? Because this hadith says, don't pray when that fayh, when that burning fire is there. Which is why in you find in the countries where the Malikiya are strongest, like in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, they hardly ever pray the dhuhr at the beginning of time. In the city where I studied, Kairouan, they have one mosque which is not Maliki. We call it the Hanafi mosque, because the Imam is Hanafi, the Mu'adhin is Hanafi, and one other person is Hanafi. There are only 3 Hanafis in the whole city. and they're called the Beys because they're Turkish. But they pray in their mosque at 1 o'clock. Now if you're travelling and you want to get Jama'at prayer, pray at 1 o'clock with them and then get on the bus. You can get to Asr before you get to the next city. And that's the only people that pray there. Everyone else prays later. Okay, and then, so you can see all the other hadith relate to those the first two hadith. So that's basically what the times of the prayer are. So this I'm sure you've all studied. So how does that, what relevance does that have to living in Glasgow? Now, there is a slight difference of opinion when it comes to that hadith about when does the Asr begin. When does the Asr begin? Because according to Abu Hanifa, he doesn't put much weight on the first hadith, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ prayed, and it was what we call the first mithl. What's meant by the first mithl is that if you put a stick, 1 meter stick in the ground, and the sun appears to be moving through the sky, the shadow will appear to move on the ground, and it will get longer and shorter according to where the sun is. When the sun is right above, there's no shadow. That's called the zawal. God zala dhil. The shadow has disappeared, so that's why it's called zawal. And then it reappears, and it appears on the other side. Why? Because the sun has moved to this side. And it gets longer and longer and longer. You get 10 centimeters, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 1 meter. When it hits 1 meter, according to the first hadith, it's Asr. When it hits 2 meters, that's when the second hadith mentioned it. Now, why did Jibril teach the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ these two? The answer is, I don't know. He just did. And that's what you do with fiqh. If you're a mujtahid, if you know all about fiqh, and you know how to interpret the hadith, you do what you like. But I don't. That's where the imams come in. That's why a madhab is relevant, because I don't know the answer. I can tell you that Imam Shafi, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, all of Imam Malik all say that the beginning of the time was when the first meter took place. And the best time to pray is up until the second meter, called Waqt al-Fadila. But after that, it's still permitted to pray until the Maghrib. Why? Because Muhammad ﷺ said the same as he did with the Fajr, Man adraka rak'atan min al-asri qabla ghurub al-shams faqad adraka al-asr. Whoever gets 1 rak'ah of the Asr prayer before the Maghrib. So if you hear the adhan, I come in, you'll get this soon. Don't worry, this is going to really happen to you. When the Asr is at 3:30, okay, and your lecture finishes at 3, it started at 12:30 and it finishes at 3:15. You either get up and leave the lecture and pray Asr, or you run down here, make wudu, you get to that, and you go, Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! And then you hear the adhan. And you've only done 1 rak'ah. Is your salah valid? According to that hadith, Man adraka rak'atan min al-asri qabla ghurub al-shams faqad adraka al-asr. And then you carry on Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He is so kind to me. Maliki Yawmiddin. He's the king. He really is the king. And they're calling the Iqamah for Maghrib. And you're still doing Asr. Don't worry, your salah's still valid. Man adraka raka'atan min al-asri faqad adraka al-asr. Even though they're praying Maghrib, you're on your 4th raka'ah of Asr, it's still valid. And he's praying his 1st raka'ah of Maghrib. It would have been nice if he just waited a few minutes for you, which alhamdulillah I think they do in this mosque. In this particular mosque, they usually wait about 10 minutes. Why? Because I think they know. I think they know how many people run into this mosque, nearly get a heart attack, and then they say, Alhamdulillah, the 2nd raka'ah. Anyway, I think that should cover everything. Oh no, it probably doesn't. That's Asr time. Right, when it comes to the summer, now we have a mushkil. We have a problem here. Because when we came to the Isha prayer, I said that it doesn't always come. And that's the truth. Isha prayer, according to Imam Shafi'i, is when the Shafaq al-Ahmar disappears from the sky. When the redness of the sky, the redness of the sun disappears. This is what we call the Qawl al-Mu'tamid, the established position. There are other positions. One I've been taught in by a Malaysian teacher who said that the Maghrib prayer is extremely short. It lasts as long as it takes you to do wudu, adhan, iqama, and 5 rak'ah of salah, which is about 15 minutes. So if you don't pray within the first 15 minutes, khalas, you missed the prayer. And some of you may have been taught by the same teacher that I was taught, and so this might make sense. And I can see a couple of people nod, yeah, that's what I was taught, so a bit strict. I can see them saying that. That's an opinion. The Mu'tamid position is it's until the redness disappears, which is much later than that. So if you keep to that, don't worry that if your lecture just ran on and Maghrib has come in, I've only got 10 minutes, according to Ustaz Fulan, who taught me in the kampong. Because in the kampong you could pray within the first 15 minutes. Because kampong time is different to Samsa time. Strathclyde University and Glasgow University have different, they're kind of strict when it comes to lectures. And if you've got 10 minutes and you decide, well, according to the Qawl al-Mu'tamid, I have more than 10 minutes to pray, I can pray 15 minutes time down in the mosque, then I don't miss the last 10 minutes of my lecture, and also I kind of get embarrassed, going and making wudu and praying at the back when everyone's looking at me when they're supposed to be watching the lecturer talk about protons and neutrons and all that kind of stuff. And they're turning around and looking at me. I get a bit shy, so I think I'll just wait 15 minutes and take the other opinion. Okay? So that's the Isha prayer is on the Qawl al-Mu'tamid of the Shafi'i madhab, is when the Shafaq Ahmad disappears, when the redness of the sky disappears. There is another opinion which says it's when the white, it's the other way around, isn't it? When the white disappears, means that, the Shafaq al-Abyad is when the white disappears, which is the opinion of Abu Hanifa, which is much later, which is about an hour and 10 minutes after Maghrib, or an hour and 20 minutes after Maghrib. So if Maghrib comes in at 4 o'clock, the whiteness of the sky will probably disappear round about 5:20, 5:30. So when you look at the timetables from Glasgow, you might see differences of when Isha begins. Some will say, so we just take 4 o'clock as Maghrib now. Some will say 5:20. Some will say 5:30. Some will say 5:45. And that's because they've timed it according to the Shafaq al-Ahmar, the redness of the sky, or the whiteness of the sky. And some people dispute when that whiteness has actually disappeared. Is white grey? Is grey white? And that's why they take a little bit longer. So you'll find those differences on your timetables. Now, as I said in the beginning, I ain't here to tell you what to do. And I'm not here to tell you to support Celtic, because that would be wrong. Because we're not fanatics. And in the end, I don't really care who you support. What really matters is whether your salah is valid. And your salah, if it's valid, I was also taught when it comes to madhab, he says, people like you don't have madhab. One of my teachers said to me, people like us don't have madhab. He's a big scholar. And what he meant by that was us little people, we just make dua, because there's a principle when it comes to the ummi. The ummi is a person that doesn't read. If a person doesn't know how to pray, doesn't really know much, and he just prays the best he can. He just became Muslim a few weeks ago, he's just praying the best he can. You never tell a new Muslim, follow this madhab. You just don't do it. You just say Allahu Akbar. But he doesn't say Allahu Akbar quite correctly. He says, Allahu Akbar. Is his salah valid? Huh? It depends. Because the word Akbar is incorrect. According to Imam Shafi'i, it has to be Akbar. No mad. The mad negates the takbir, because it changes the meaning. According to others, it doesn't. Now, is his salah valid? According to the very strict Celtic fans, Shafi'is, perhaps it's not. But I'm ignorant. I'm illiterate. And if it's valid, the illiterate prayer is accepted as long as it's valid according to somebody. And according to some, it's valid, so let him just count it as being valid. So for us to say, look, I'm just doing my best. I'm just doing my best. Allah, please accept it. I'm doing my best. I'm not saying go and mix all the madhabs up. I'm just saying do your best. But don't be so fanatical that you tie yourself into I am now praying according to Imam Shafi'i. Because if you did that, you'd be invalid on most things, because you can't follow every little detail and get it right. So just do your best. So when it comes to this, the timings, just do your best. But you have to choose how to do it, because in the end, it's not my decision. It's your decision. So learn the most you can and do the best you can. And inshallah, Allah will accept it. So that's about the Maghrib and the Isha. Right, in the summertime, the Shafaq al-Ahmar never disappears. Until the Fajr comes in, the Shafaq al-Ahmar is still there. So then Isha never came, and Fajr is already there. So what did you do about Isha? I can tell you all the opinions, and then I can say you choose what you like. That's an easy way to do it. Yeah? Right, some say you don't pray at all. Because the sabab of the prayer is when the Isha comes in. If it doesn't come in, you don't need to pray. Personally, I think that's a bit scary. Because Yawm al-Qiyamah, if I turn around and say, actually, Allah, according to, I read on the internet that, I don't think I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to pray Isha. My problem is when. Right, some people will calculate. And they'll calculate by dividing the night into 7 parts. And when the first of the 7 parts is over, they'll pray Isha. And if you take Glasgow Central Mosque timetable, that's how they work out the Isha prayer. Some people will say, well, no, on average, in a year, the Shafaq al-Ahmar disappears after 1 hour, or 1 hour and 10 minutes. So I'm going to pray 1 hour and 10 minutes after Maghrib. Some people say, but sometimes it lasts 1.5 hours. So they're going to say, we'll pray after 1.5 hours. And some people say, why not just do the 2 prayers together? And bring the one taqdeem, because I don't know when it came in. So I'm just going to bring it forward and pray Maghrib and Isha together. Now each one of those fiqh questions, or each one of those answers has evidence as to explain why they calculated it that way. And each one of them has its validity. But they're all calculations. None of them are by the sun. So any of those calculations could be right. And any of those calculations could be wrong. So just do what you're confident is correct. Choose what makes your heart feel at peace. Because one of the most important things about the salah is that you don't have doubt. Oh Allah. You have doubt about how good your prayer is, but don't doubt about the time. Don't doubt about your clothes. Make sure your clothes are clean. There's one thing that always attracts me about Malaysians and the people from the Nusantara area generally. Something that I've experienced from very young is that, please forgive me, I've met some Malaysian girls who are not the most modest in their dress. Okay? But in their handbag, they have their prayer clothes. And as soon as the time for prayer comes out, everything's covered. Everything's clean. They pray away and they pray and they're off. They're back to like Superman. And it always used to make me laugh when I saw this. But then I realized the wisdom behind it is that they pray with complete certainty that their clothes are clean. That's one of the important things. And whatever happens between them and Allah, Allah knows what's in their heart, so that's not much for me to get into. But there's one thing that I admire, is that they pray. And they're always ready to pray. And it's like strange. I remember traveling with one lady. I wasn't traveling with this lady, I was traveling and she was on the bus. It came to prayer time, and I was thinking I could combine my prayers later. She just got off the bus, off by the side of the car, everything on, superwoman, prays, back on the bus. And I'm thinking, anybody that looks at her, they'll think, wow, she's some super modern, traveling girl. But she ain't. She's concerned about the prayer and about the time. And Yawm al-Qiyamah, that's the first thing she's going to be asked about. Wow. Okay, that's prayer time. I think I'm running behind time. Okay, that was the first. Salat al-Jam' and Salat al-Qasr. Okay, Salat al-Jam' and Salat al-Qasr, the second one, is kind of touching on that, what we've already mentioned. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam combined his prayer of Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha on specific occasions. When he travelled, when he was in Mina, Muzdalifah and Arafah on the Hajj time, and when it rained. Now, I tell you, in Glasgow, it rains 90% of the time. Now, if you take that literally, that means you can combine all the time in Glasgow, except for June the 30th, which is the day when it doesn't rain traditionally. There's sometimes a day before, the day after. So 3 days a year you can't. Well, actually, it's a little bit more than that. But generally speaking, it rains all the time here. Does that mean you can combine the prayer all the time? No. Combining the prayer in rain was specific to Al-Madinah for a specific reason. Why? Because if anyone remembers what Medina used to be like, none of you are old enough, I'm only just old enough. When it rains, it really rains and you can't leave the hotel. You can't walk to the haram because it's too muddy. So when it rained, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would either tell people, wait and pray Asr late, pray Dhuhr with Asr later on, when it's easier to come to the mosque, or he'll pray in the mosque and say, don't come for Asr. Because there's difficulty. So the reason for combining the prayer is difficulty. Difficulty. Not rain. Who defines what difficulty is? I'll give you a question that came to me by my good friend, some of you may know, well, you may have heard of him, Dr. Abdullah Al-Haddad, a famous Malaysian neurosurgeon. I think he was one of the first people to do neurosurgery while the patient was still awake. This was the technique that he perfected. He's now teaching in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. Very great man. And as I just said, he's a neurosurgeon. And any neurosurgeons amongst you? I can tell you neurosurgery takes a long time. It's like, he says rewiring a brain can take up to 20 hours. That's what he used to joke. It takes up to 20 hours. So sometimes he'll be on shift, not on shift, actually in somebody's brain. Literally, he'll be in somebody's brain for 6 hours, non-stop. You have to make sure you go to the toilet before you start the surgery. They're the rules. Because if you stop, everybody else has to stop, including sometimes the patient, who then doesn't start ever again. So he asked me, what do I do about Maghrib and Isha? What would you have told him? You probably wouldn't have told him anything because you're too shy to give a fatwa. What would you expect me to tell him? Combine the prayer. I think that's a legitimate udhr, keeping the guy alive. And it might be more difficult when there's 25 people involved in this operation. It's not like me saying, okay, I'm just going to pray my Dhuhr and Asr now and leave my lecture. That's my decision, and it's an easy decision to make. Sometimes I've done it, usually when the lecture's really boring. But sometimes I've decided to delay it. For him, it's not such a simple decision because he's got 20 people. He's got a team of anaesthetists. Not just an anaesthetist, he has a team of anaesthetists who are waiting on every single movement that he makes. He says, okay, just wait a minute, I'm just going to do some sunnah prayers. No, it doesn't work like that. I told him that if you think this is a real difficulty, then remember the hadith of the rain. compare the difficulty with that. Is that for me, when it rains, it's not difficult. For me, when I'm in a lecture, most of my lectures are boring, and usually I can get up and leave. But that's my decision. I don't think that's the same as rain. I think it's less than that. But sometimes when I'm in a meeting of a certain type, for example, where a key decision is being made about a child, and the child's future is based on this meeting, and my input will change the path of this child's life, perhaps, then I won't tell people, just make the decision without me, I've got to make Asr prayer. You know, that's the kind of decision I will make where to combine. So, under normal circumstances, Qasr is only when you're travelling more than 48 miles for less than 4 days. Okay? Jam is only when you travel or you have a real difficulty. Okay, moving on. Qibla, khuf. The next question was about khuf. Can you wipe over your socks? It depends on the quality of the socks. The khufain literally are 2 leather socks. Now let me just explain how people interpret this. Imam Malik says leather socks are leather socks. I love Imam Malik. You notice that? I love this man. He's so simple. He says leather socks are leather socks. Khalas, I love him. Imam Shafi'i, he says leather socks are leather socks and things which are like leather socks. I love him too. It's just a bit more complicated. What does Imam Shafi'i mean? Imam Malik, I understand, he means leather socks. Khalas. Nice, easy one. What does Imam Shafi'i mean? Leather socks and socks which are like leather socks. They have the sifa, not sifa, attribute. They have the attribute of leather. What are the attributes of leather? 1, they're impermeable. The water doesn't penetrate. The second is that they're hard wearing. The third is khuf by definition covers the ankle. Therefore, these are like leather socks. They're not made of leather, they're made of cotton. But they're so tightly knit that if I were to pour water on them, I wouldn't feel them on my feet. They also cover my ankles. And I know I can walk from here to the car and back again in them. So they're durable. Can you do that in your socks? No. The water will probably go through to your feet. They'll probably tear before you get to my car. And they don't, or they probably do cover your ankle. Okay? So the definition of Imam Shafi'i's khufain is that they are like leather socks in these aspects. And these are the 2 main opinions about wiping over socks. There are some, and I've never found a traditional scholar from any of the early scholars who have said that anything else is valid. You might read on the internet, oh yeah, don't worry, wipe over any socks. My understanding is that no traditional classical scholar has ever said that. Okay. Tayammum is when you don't have water. Tayammum is only valid if you can't, under 2 circumstances, where there is no water, and there's subcategories that we have some water but not enough. You have water which you can drink, but basically where you don't have water, or where the water will damage you. And there's certain circumstances where that might happen. Is, for example, if you have a scar, a wound, where the water would increase the, or you have such an illness which is so severe that using the water to wash yourself could cause you significant deterioration in your condition. An example of where I recommended somebody do tayammum. I was recently spent many months in a hospital visiting various people, including his mum. She'd just come out of intensive care and was really very, very sick. And had to be washed by somebody else. So for her to make wudu using the water meant that the person that does her washing has to do the wudu for her, and it would also may cause some difficulties in terms of wiping her hair, wiping her hair in particular, and also just the condition was there was some points where it was really quite difficult for her, even for somebody to do the wudu on her, and therefore she did tayammum until there was a point where she could have somebody do the water on her, except for the ghusl, because doing the ghusl on her actually might deteriorate her condition. So therefore she could do tayammum under this circumstance, for the ghusl but not for the wudu, because she was slightly better. So you can see the tayammum in the case of illness is whether it's going to cause you deterioration in your illness. So it might be that you've got a really, really bad flu and you have Mande Wajib, how you say it in Malay. Yeah? And you need Mande Wajib, and the only way you can do that is with tayammum, because by going and having a proper ghusl, a proper shower, may increase, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, it might be you might be so sick that it makes you worse. Wallahu a'lam. But they're the kind of things that tayammum might be acceptable under, but under other circumstances, no. Idris, what was the pen number again? 2. 1. And then? 2. Okay, good. No, it wasn't. That's wrong, Idris. Okay. Qibla. I think Qibla is fairly straightforward. In the UK, the Qibla is fairly straightforward. You point straight to Mecca. The place where this is difficult is in America. Because in America, people on the map would face southeast, because most maps show Mecca is to the southeast. But actually it's the shortest ways over the North Pole. So that's where the Qibla is an issue in America. The Qibla isn't really an issue in the UK, except where people are slightly more tolerant than others. What do I mean by tolerant? Is that Imam Shafi'i's opinion is that you have to face Mecca with certainty, or ghalabat al-dhann. What does ghalabat al-dhann means? More than 50% supposition. So I'm praying in this direction because that's the way it looks.